Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, Silent Bob from all those Jay and Silent Bob type pictures, man. And I'm breaking the silence to tell you that you're listening to the Buff and the Blazer podcast with Drew and Toddo. Enjoy the show, kids.
Hey, Toddo.
What's going on?
We got a podcast, The Buff and the Blazer. If I was a listener, where would I go to find more?
You can check us out on our website, thebuffandtheblazer.com. Drew over there writes a article that goes along with every single episode.
You can find all kinds of little extras on the articles, and you can listen to the podcast right there. Also, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, we're on Twitter at Buff and Blazer. Follow us there.
Get those clicks, people.
The Buff and the Blazer.
Welcome to episode 59 of the Buff and the Blazer podcast, the show where we discuss and break down movies old and new. I'm Drew, and as always, I'm here with my pal, Mr. L. Toddo.
Yo.
How's it going, man?
It's going good.
Yeah?
Super Bowl tomorrow. Great movie last night.
Yeah.
All good.
Got a nice weekend of viewing in on a bunch of different things. But the movie we're discussing in episode 59 is News of the World, directed by Paul Greengrass. And this film was released in December, I think, Christmas around that time. And it's available on demand, I think, right now. You still have to pay for it, right? I don't think you can.
Just rental as well. Like the option to buy wasn't even there.
Yeah, so I think it was like a $20 rental or something like that.
Yep, that's what I paid.
All right, me too. So yeah, we both dropped money on it. And what did you think, man, of News of the World? What are your first impressions?
I was really impressed. I didn't think it was going to be that great. I had some apprehension about Tom Hanks in kind of the Western role, I guess.
Yeah.
But all of that disappeared within 5 minutes, and I was fully on board. It hit for me on so many different levels. The geography stuff was awesome. The storyline was new and not your classic kind of hero story, I felt. The time period was fairly interesting, like just post Civil War. I feel like it had a ton of parallels with modern times. I was really impressed with the acting. Like, I obviously expected Hanks to be great, but the Joanna was really good. And then a lot of the kind of supporting actors I was really impressed by. And like the attention to detail relative to the time period and all of the set design, I was just like really impressed. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't as boring as I thought it would be at the beginning. I thought it was going to be fairly boring and kind of a slog, but it wasn't. There's like quite a bit of pretty entertaining action. Even though it's not like a bang-bang, shoot-'em-up Western.
Yeah.
And all in all, I was thoroughly impressed, and it was really good. A lot better than I anticipated. How about you?
Nice. For whatever reason, I also had the same apprehension with Tom Hanks in this kind of role. Like, I just don't see Tom Hanks as the cowboy type, quote unquote.
Yeah, me too.
And like you, once the film starts rolling, he owns that role. He fits it perfectly. And Tom Hanks, he's one of the best actors around. So I'm not at all surprised that he was able to pull it off. And like you, I think what stood out to me most about the film is, like, for me, I'm actually a fan of Westerns. Like, I like some of the classic ones, but I even like some that are a little bit more modern. So ones that were shot and made in the 90s and the 2000s, I kind of, there's something about that time period that's cool to me on camera, like in film, as a genre anyway. And this film, I felt like it took the best elements of those movies without being your cliche Western film. Mm-hmm. And like, it still had a lot of substance to it. It had a really timely, important message, I think. But what was so cool about it was none of the film's messaging seemed forced at all. Like, it all fit the particular period of when the film takes place, which is that post-Civil War Reconstruction era.
Yeah.
And so I loved that. And I loved how the film taking place in that time period had a lot to say with our own times while telling a really heartwarming story and a message I think that's kind of needed right now and kind of nice. So yeah, I thought it was really well done. And the production value of the film, like it's a Universal picture, so I'm sure their budget was pretty nice. But there's a lot to go into. Yeah, there's a lot to go into in terms of the craftsmanship, the cinematography, set design. It looked gorgeous, and I loved all of the on-location shooting outdoors. Could you take a guess as to where they shot this film? It takes place in Texas, but
it looked like, now granted, I've never been to Texas besides an airport, but it looked like there was quite a bit more topography than I imagine there being in Texas.
Yeah, so
but
you
that
notice,
landscape I'm very familiar with in terms of like the juniper, high desert, woodland.
Yeah. There's a lot of wide open landscape, right, in the film? Just like miles and miles and miles of open land. And I'm sure that was hard to find in Texas today.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, all of the shooting took place in New Mexico.
Okay, that makes a little more sense to me.
Yeah, so that's where all the on-location shooting happened, is in New Mexico.
Yeah, like the part of the movie when they go to that town where Hanks is or Captain Kidd is trying to pawn off Joanna on that couple that he knows.
Right.
And those were pinyon trees in their backyard. Those were pinyon pines. So I was like, they're definitely in a high desert somewhere. And I don't know how much of Texas is technically high desert.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, and I'll post a video on the article for this film on the website, and I attached it, but they talk a little bit about it in there. And they were saying for how they envisioned the film to be, they needed a lot of open space where they didn't have to really go in and digitally remove a whole lot. And they said New Mexico fit the bill, like, really, really well. And it comes across in the film. I think this is another one of those movies that I wish I could have seen on a big screen.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Especially like the scene where Joanna is screaming out to all the Kiowa tribe across the river. Like, how epic would that have been on a big screen?
Yeah, and that was one of those gut-wrenching scenes. Just really tragic, and one of those moments where you can absolutely connect with how she's feeling at that moment. So many awesome little tidbits in the film, like all throughout, little moments that really get you invested into the characters.
And it's a cool subject matter, right? Because it's something that was actually quite frequent in the West, where settlers would either, be taken or end up living with tribes and really not want to go back to the quote-unquote civilized way of life.
Yeah.
After a period of time. I can't remember. I think it was one of the presidents or one of the founders, right? I think it was maybe Jefferson or maybe Ben Franklin or something that wrote like a paper talking about this issue, right? Like talking about why are so many of, our people, white folks going to live this different way of life and then not wanting to come back to our way of life. Like, what's wrong with us? Kind of asking those questions. I can't remember which. I think it was either Ben Franklin or Thomas Jefferson who talked about it way, way back when.
Oh, okay. Something that they picked up on and they were questioning at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you get the sense that that's how it is for Joanna in this movie, huh? Or Johanna.
Oh yeah, did I say Joanna a bunch? Yeah, Johanna. Yeah, it's something that's very frequent. I imagine in the literature, it's probably pretty well documented.
Yeah.
And she almost kind of walks this line where like she's remembering.
Yeah.
Back to things like speaking German and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And that's just super, super interesting topic.
Well, and here's just jumping ahead a little bit, because we're going to get into story here, and I think we're going to dive a little bit into story, right? This film has been out for a few months now, a couple months.
Yeah.
We're not going to spoil anything major, but we will talk a little bit more in depth with some of the things going on.
Okay.
So,
fair warning.
Yeah. But don't worry, we're not going to give away endings or anything like that. But just to jump ahead a little bit into character, I think that the way the characters are written in this film and their backgrounds, there's no one-note character in this movie. I think they're all they have a nice dimension to them. And Johanna in particular, because she's not just like a European kid that went native and wants to get back. She's a lot more complex than that.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that, well, we'll talk about it once we get to character. I don't want to
Okay.
I don't want to spill it too early. But I love the way that they wrote her character specifically, because she is walking this line of almost being caught in between worlds, and she's kind of a lost character in some sense. And her relationship with Kid is kind of what brings her onto a path that is almost kind of her own, which we'll talk a little bit about. But anyways, in terms of the general story, the setup for the film, let me just ask you first, before we dive deep into it, are you familiar with the Western genre? Are you into Westerns at all?
No, I wouldn't say I'm into them. Particularly the old ones, I'm not into it. I think the only one I kind of like that I've seen, what's it called, like A Mule for Sister Sarah or something?
Oh, okay.
It's like an old Clint Eastwood movie with this redhead chick. I like that. But I do like the more modern ones.
Okay.
Like Dances with Wolves. I guess that's more modern. That's still pretty old.
Mm-hmm.
Hostiles.
Yeah.
That was just a few years back.
Right. That's the one with
And
Christian
I really
Bale.
like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say I'm not super into it, but I'm not against the genre.
Okay. So in terms of the general story, like how Johanna comes to meet Captain Kidd and her kind of backstory, you mentioned that the film kind of caught you off guard in some sense. Like, did any of that have to do with the story? Like in terms of how it was written or the makeup of the story in general? Was there anything that kind of surprised you?
Well, I saw the trailer, so I knew it was like the general theme was like Tom Hanks was trying to get this girl back to somewhere.
Yeah.
But I had no idea of the Native American aspect, particularly with Johanna's character.
Okay.
And I guess that kind of caught me off guard.
In terms of her like leaning towards her Native American upbringing?
Yeah. I had no idea that, like, I had envisioned that there would be Indians in the movie.
Yeah.
But I almost figured it would just be some cliche, like, oh, Indians robbing them or fucking with them while they're trying to move through the country type shit. I didn't think it would have that other angle.
Yeah, and we don't get any of that in the film.
No.
At all. Like, I mean, it's the circumstance that left Johanna, with the native peoples, but you don't see any of that, like, the natives are killing our people and attacking the white man. Like, you don't get any of that in this movie. And it was kind of refreshing.
Yeah, and you get, like, the other side of it, like the lie of it.
Yeah.
Like, obviously it was happening, you know, but it's so easy to go the cliche route.
Yeah.
And they didn't go that route at all.
Right. The other thing I really liked about the film is we said it takes place right after the period of the Civil War. So
it's like 1870, right?
Yeah, that's like during Ulysses S. Grant's presidency.
Yeah.
What I liked is they do a good job of showing how Texans, at least, are struggling in the period of Reconstruction. It's like the country still hasn't recovered from the Civil War, so they're almost in like a depression almost. At the same time, they also show the struggle of the native people. Mm-hmm. And you see, like, you get glimpses of the Kiowa, and you see that they're being forced from their land and like onto reservations and stuff, and you just see kind of this, I guess, their livelihood getting sucked out of them. And when you see them on screen, they almost look like they're kind of in a daze.
Yeah.
And you get to see how both both groups of people are just completely, torn apart in a sense of what's going on around them.
Yeah, and on that same note, one group of people is torn apart because they're a bunch of assholes.
Yes.
And the other group of people is being torn apart because all of their resources and all of their land are being stolen.
Yeah.
So it's quite the contrast.
Yes.
That one side is just bitching because they want to murder black people and Mexicans and Indians, and the other side is like, why are you killing all the buffalo? Like, chill the fuck out.
Yeah. And I liked how they don't get ignored in the film. I like how they're given the screen time, and you get to see what the state of things are for them. Although they don't get a whole lot of screen time because there's not a whole lot of interaction between like Captain Kidd and the Kiowa. But for the moments that they're on screen, it's really effective, I thought.
Yeah, and it's very mystical, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no dialogue between any natives and any white folk in the movie at all.
Yeah.
With exception of dialogue that happens between Johanna and some natives, but you don't ever hear any of it.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the news-telling aspect of this film, because I think that's one of the really relevant parts of the story.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure. This film is based off a novel, and I'm not sure when the novel was written, but I loved how in a time where our news is not the most trusted element of society at the moment, and how people consume it and where they get it from.
Yeah, it's all just sensationalism and advertising and playing on people's emotions.
Yeah, I loved how they weave that into the story and how it plays a central role into like how him telling the news, he's able to show people that there's others out there just like you that are struggling like you and are completely different from your way of life in this particular circumstance. But it's like it's the shared humanity, and I think that's one of like the strongest points of this film. Is just to get people to like chill the fuck out and be a good person because we're all sort of like trying to figure this out.
Yeah, that is the most relevant part, right? Like, because even today, it's you ask people to just not be dicks. It's like, oh, you're taking away our life. It's like, yes, because your lifestyle is being an asshole. Like, stop being an asshole, But what I really enjoyed about the news element of the story, just to give some context, Tom Hanks' character, Captain Kidd, is a traveling newsman, right? He just goes from town to town and what does he charge? 10 cents?
10 cents.
For people to come listen to him read newspapers from all over the world, or is it just the country?
Seems like the country.
Yeah. The title is World, but he seems to only read papers from other parts of the U.S. But I really liked that angle of the story because it add layers to the movie beyond the main story.
Right.
That gave it a much more almost topical message.
Yeah.
And they easily could have told the story without any of that, right?
Yeah.
He could have been just a cowboy.
Right.
Right? Who is like a bouncing ranch hand. It would have worked just as easily, and probably still been really good. But this whole other angle just gives it a lot more depth.
I'm really curious if people actually did this back in the time.
Oh, I bet.
You would think,
I
right?
bet they did. You know what kind of caught me off guard was like, as someone like myself who's really interested in like deep antiquity, and I almost like scoff at 19th century. Just because I'm like not interested. It's like, oh, we have everything written down. It's like, who fucking cares? But this movie kind of really drove home how it's not that long ago. It's like 150 years ago, and in the grand scheme of humans, that's not a long period at all. But it just, everything is so different. Like that.
Yeah.
You forget living in a modern world that like internal combustion engines and electricity and all of these things that we
paved roads.
Paved roads. Yeah, just anything. It just kind of caught me off guard of like, oh yeah, 1870 was quite a long time ago. Even though as someone who studies like the classics and deep antiquity, it's like 150 years is nothing to me, right?
Yeah.
But did that like do anything for you too? Because like we study history for our jobs, right? And
Yeah.
and I always just like think of it like, okay, so for context, the mountain range that I live in has like a massive mining boom in the 1860s.
Yeah.
And I find that stuff out in the woods all the time, just walking around from that period. And to me, it has like, it doesn't interest me one bit. And then seeing a movie like this, it's like, oh, I guess that was an interesting time period, particularly in Texas, I guess, right?
Yeah. I guess I'm a little bit different in that it just kind of all interests me because it's all from a time that I know nothing about. I mean, I know about it from reading it, but in terms of experiencing anything having to do with those time periods, I know nothing. And so for me, it is kind of cool to see that stuff, even from like the 19th century historics, things that you find like that. But I guess what's interesting is to see how people, at least in this country, how they deal with that time period that they live in, because it's rugged. And I guess that's what appeals to me so much about Westerns, is like it's a more rugged time. You have this like kind of outlaw lawlessness going on almost, although in this film it seems very much controlled by the Union, at least in Texas.
Yeah, I got a question. So those dudes that roll up on Hanks right when he finds Johanna, are those Confederate guys?
The ones
Is
that
that like
end
a
up,
roving band of Confederate kind of like militia?
like the guys who end up going after him?
No. The guys that roll up on him right when he finds Johanna. He finds the lynched guy.
I see what you're saying.
They had Confederate uniforms on. So are they like representing like a kind of like rebel militia?
See, I
Because they
don't
were
think so.
different from the blue coat Union soldiers that are
Yeah, because there was a
featured in
group
the
of blue
movie
coats that
frequently.
he ran across, right? That he was showing the papers to and stuff like that.
I can't remember if because I felt like they all had gray uniforms on.
Yeah, I don't know. All I remember is in the beginning when he finds the wagon turned over, he runs into a band of Union soldiers.
Oh, those are Union soldiers?
Because they're wearing the blue coats. But then he does, when him and Johanna are traveling, they do run into that group of like disgruntled Texans that lead him to that.
Yeah, that have like their own little town, their own little evil town.
Yeah, their own
That's
little...
not what I'm talking about. I
Okay.
thought they had gray uniforms on for some reason. Maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly.
Unless I forgot. But I thought they were Union soldiers coming from like that town where he tries to give Johanna off to that Union officer.
Yeah.
And they tell him, no, you have to go over there and go to headquarters. They'll let you know what you have to do.
Okay. Maybe I misread that.
Yeah, but I was actually surprised with the Union element in Texas at that time. I'm just not real familiar with the background of it, but they're even like really strict on carrying weapons around in Texas and stuff. I thought that was crazy, especially for the 1870s. I guess that was a thing. I guess
Right.
you couldn't just walk around with your pistol hanging out or...
Yeah, right. They were okay with him having his bird shot and his 410 shotgun, but not okay with sidearms.
Oh, speaking of the birdshot, how cool was that?
Dude. It's probably my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, she was digging around for the can of coins, and I'm like, what is she doing? And then
Yeah.
she comes back, and I was like, man, that's brilliant.
Yeah. It's just a really tiny little thing, but it was like a really heavy bonding moment.
Yeah.
Bonding and murder, I love it.
Yeah, there's just so many little parts of this film that I really enjoyed. Let's talk about where the story kind of ends up, I guess. We won't talk about the ending particularly, but did you kind of have a sense already of where the story was going to go and I guess ultimately how it was going to end up?
No.
Really?
So, like, I thought it was going to be all peachy keen. And then after, I'll talk vaguely here. And then after he finds the Boldens, right? Or Bowdlin, however you pronounce that.
Okay.
Oh, no, those are the wrong folks. His aunt and uncle, whoever they are. I can't remember.
Oh yeah.
But when he finds them, they thought the stories at that point, I figured the stories were basically going to diverge and go their other opposite directions.
Leonberger
Leonberger.
or Leonberger. I think those were her.
How much does that cost? The Leon burger. Okay, yeah. Anna and Wilhelm,
Yes.
or Wilhelm, to be accurate. We love you, Julie. But no, it did kind of catch me a little bit off guard, and I'm usually pretty not into a neat bow.
Yeah.
But what really got me was the final kind of news reading. And I
Okay.
actually allowed myself to be like, warm-hearted and joyful.
Like
At
the
the
moment
ending.
itself or the actual story he's telling?
Not the story, the moment.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And I was actually like, oh, I do have a heart. And I really enjoyed the resolution. What about you? Did you think you knew where it was going?
So here's the thing. Oddly enough, I saw that ending coming. But like you, it's for whatever reason it's done so in a way that doesn't feel cheap or it doesn't feel what's the word? I can't even think of a good
Cheesy?
Well, yeah, cheesy, but I guess like just fabricated in that way. Like we're going to put this and wrap it up in a nice bow and give you a nice warm loving ending just to make you happy. But it's done so in a way that makes sense to the story and it makes sense to the characters. And I think
Both
that's
of their backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense to both of their backgrounds because, and we won't give this away, but Captain Kidd's got some demons that he's never
Yeah.
had the courage to deal with.
Right.
And it's almost like him dealing with those demons gives him the extra courage to take this other step, although he's been being courageous the entire movie.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a courageous aspect or being courageous in the willingness to love, I guess.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It's almost like he's really hardened in the beginning and he allows himself to open up to vulnerability the more and more he gets closer to Johanna.
Yeah.
And what's nice is the two characters need each other. And they don't need each other in the beginning, and it's clear, you clearly see that they don't need each other and that they butt heads. He's just doing it because she's a child, and he at least wants to get her to where she belongs.
Yeah.
And she wants to just run away. She wants to go back to her people. And as the film progresses, they end up forming this bond, and they just can't be separated because they like heal each other. And I think that's why you become so invested in them by the end, is because everyone loves a story like that, where like you can clearly see that two characters are good together and they make each other better. And I mean, I guess this is a good segue into character, but I like the fact that he doesn't, there are times where he's like, we got to eat our food with a spoon and stuff like that, and teaching her the Western way of doing things because that's just who he is. That's all he knows. But at the same time, he's very much into this Kiowa identity that she has established.
Yeah.
And on their journeys, like from town to town, he learns a little bit of the language from her. He's interested in learning it in the first place. And he sees that it's kind of a part of who she is. And you never get the sense that he's trying to stamp that out of her. It's kind of
that's
like
what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's almost like an acceptance. It's like, this is who you are, and that's just how it is, and I accept you for it.
And it's like very subtle the way they do it in the movie. It's almost like you can see him slowly realizing that it's not the wrong way of living. It's just a different way.
Yes.
And you can almost see him like making that turn on a psychological side and becoming much more empathetic with what she's going through and realizing that just trying to beat the Indian out of her is not going to be productive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like he wants to either way.
Right.
I really enjoyed that aspect of the movie on a messaging standpoint because they never come out and say it, right? He never has like a heartfelt talk with her like, oh, everything's just different. It's all just very subtle.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed that because that's the type of messaging I think is really impactful because it speaks to a much larger human narrative behind quote unquote civilized and quote unquote savage or barbarian or whatever the stupid derogatory word is you want to throw on it, right?
Right. And on top of all that, if that doesn't do it for you, the moment when, I think this is in Dallas, if I'm not mistaken, when they enter Dallas and he meets up with Mrs. Gannett and she's given them a place to lodge and they're eating, looks like lunch or something, dinner, and she's sitting down. Yeah, and Johanna's like using her hands to eat her food, and he's kind of like, you know, telling her to use a spoon and whatnot. And Mrs. Gannett comes over and she's like, what are y'all looking at? Have you not seen a child eat before?
Yeah.
And she's able to speak Kiowa to Johanna, and she has a line where I guess she basically lets everyone know that she's an orphan twice over. Like, she lost her original parents, she lost her Kiowa family, and she has been orphaned twice. And that like completely gutted me when you find that out, and you're really able to connect to her even just on the basic human level. And I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah. Did they bang? Miss Gannett?
They totally banged.
Oh, hang you dog.
It's more like Mrs. Gannett, you dog. I just like that moment where he's like, thanks for the room. Then she closes the door behind her and he's like, oh, we're banging.
You haven't paid for this yet. Yeah,
that was a cool little moment. But yeah, I think she breaks some of his like hardness down a bit, and she gets him to see where she's coming from, Johanna's coming from. And I thought that was like the beginning of his journey down, opening up to her.
The turn, right?
Right.
Because you get the sense that he fought for the Confederate side, but was never really too stoked on it.
Yeah.
He just did it because he's from Texas.
Yeah, and there's a lot of lines like you could write down that would directly impact what's going on today and directly address some of the stuff we're going through. Like, I think one of the lines he had is like, we can't be at war forever, or we can't keep fighting forever, or something like that. Little things like that. Man. Yeah.
150 years later.
Right, still
They're
going.
Still hoping to get their right to own slaves back.
Crazy.
Assholes.
Yeah. So I think we mentioned Tom Hanks a bit. I think we were both kind of blown away by how well he fit into the role. Well, maybe we shouldn't have in the first place. He's so good. But I think Helena Zengel, who plays Johanna, she totally deserves a shout out.
She's the standout for sure.
She is so good. And she has a look. There's a look about her that you completely buy someone, a child in that position that she's in. And I think it's not only her acting ability, but she also has this physical presence about her that I think fits the role so well. Yeah,
I could see her getting some nomination. I don't know, do they give like a kids award?
No, it's just best actor, best actress.
Well, she would be supporting, I'm guessing. She would fall under the supporting actor, right? Or supporting actress?
I think so. Yeah, probably.
Because obviously Tom Hanks is the lead.
Yeah. But see, I wonder if it's because they separate it by actor, actress. I wonder if she would even get a nod. But I don't know. She should. Yeah, she should. But I was reading something like this film is already in the talks for Best Picture, like a Best Picture award.
Yeah, I could see this going toe-to-toe with Promising Young Woman.
Yeah.
And this probably getting the edge just for the production value.
Yeah. You know, it's weird. It's funny with the lockdown and theaters being shut down. Every time I see a big studio logo come up on the TV, it's kind of rare.
Yeah, they've been quite tight with their releases.
Yeah, for sure.
This whole time.
So it was kind of cool to see the Universal logo like shine up on the screen at the beginning. And it shows in the production value.
Oh, yeah.
Which we will definitely get into in a bit. But other than Captain Kidd and Johanna, was there anyone else that you kind of enjoyed?
A lot, to be honest. I enjoyed all of the supporting actors and actresses throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
John Calley, played by Fred Hetchinger.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed his character.
Yeah, he's really good.
Because he had that turn as well, and he's not in the movie much. maybe 10, 12 minutes, maybe a little more. But I really enjoyed him. I really enjoyed Mr. Farley, Thomas Francis Murphy.
Okay.
He was evil as hell and played it so well.
Yeah.
And those are some interesting stories too, like almost, little mini dictators.
Yeah.
in the county, right?
He's trying to seize that moment of vulnerability and take the power.
Yeah. And the propaganda that he's putting out.
Oh, yeah.
There's just so many parallels with today. It's kind of disgusting in some ways. But I mean, every person fit in the movie to me.
Yeah, I'm trying to find him because this cast list is kind of all over the place, but the actor that played the main quote unquote like antagonist villain that ends up going after him, Mr. Featherhat, he did a great job in that role.
Michelangelo Covino.
Okay, all right. What's his character's
Italian
name?
Boy. Alme.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally bought what that character was with his performance.
Yeah, just a total creep, pedophile trying to steal a young girl to have as his sex slave.
Absolutely. It was
piece of shit. He's great in the role, though.
Yeah, and that whole moment in the film, that sequence, that was on the edge of your seat kind of storytelling right there. There's not a whole lot of crazy action, but that is like, when done really well, all you need is one scene like that.
Yeah, and the picture that scene paints, right? Like, you think, okay, the guy gets in trouble, he gets his wrist slapped by the Union guys in Dallas, and the second they're out of the town, all bets are off.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they can do whatever they want, that kind of wild, wild west thing.
Yeah, and I like the sense of urgency, too. Like, you can see Kid and Johanna, and they're really trying to get the hell out of there because they know what's going to happen.
For some reason, I really liked Ray McKinnon. He played Simon Bowdlin.
Oh, yeah.
And something about that guy, his look is really cool.
Yeah, I remember him from, there's this smaller indie film called Mud with Matthew McConaughey. And
I've never seen that.
That's a really good movie. And he's in that film. I think he plays one of the boys' father in that film. And he's another really solid actor. Another, like, side kind of supporting actor role, but really, really good at what he does. Yeah, I like to see him in there. And then Mara Winningham, Doris Bowden, she plays his wife. She was in Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner, so she's no stranger to the genre. So it was kind of cool to see her back in a Western too.
Nice.
But yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that every performance in this film was pretty spot on, like really well done. Yeah, absolutely.
This guy is funny. I don't remember him in the movie, but his name, Army Lieutenant Mustache.
Really?
I don't know if I remember him.
I wonder if he actually had a mustache in the movie.
Oh, dude, he's got a wicked mustache in the photo. And
Nice.
his name in the movie is Mr. Mustache.
Sweet.
That's funny.
That's pretty cool.
You know what I want to say before? I think we've kind of moved through
Yeah.
character quite a bit. But Tom Hanks is very cherry picky with the movies that he does, right? And he only does bangers pretty much for the last, 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
And he picked a good one here.
Yeah, he definitely knows what roles are good for him.
And just one last thing to jump back a little bit to story. The movie we did last week, The Little Things.
Yeah.
This movie, News of the World, was fairly slow, right?
Yeah.
But there was like a few ups and downs, right? There was some evil dudes twice, some shitty situations, some, Wild West situations.
Yeah.
And then there was another environmental up and down that they had to deal with.
Yeah.
Right? And like a buggy situation,
Uh-huh.
which I really enjoyed. And the movie we did last week could have taken some notes to just put, 3 emotional roller coasters in when that movie had none.
Yeah.
Just slow the whole time.
Just kind of one
This
note.
movie's pretty slow, but it does give you that up and down in every act, right?
Yeah.
Like the end of the first act, I would consider maybe the outside of Dallas, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe the end of the second act is in that little shit town with all the psychos.
Yeah. I don't even remember the name of the town, but I'm like, is that
I don't
town still
either.
around, and does it still have a bad rap?
I'm sure it does.
Yeah, I have no clue on what's going on in Texas.
Have you researched at all? I don't either. And I don't want to be too judgmental because this is 150 years old, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I get the sense that the novel is maybe loosely based
Okay.
on maybe some stories or something. I'm
Maybe.
just guessing, but who knows?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But I will say that it did pique my interest a bit to see maybe what the novel would be like. But yeah, Paulette Giles is the author of this story. I don't know how closely it relates, but it's definitely based off of that. Well, let's get out of character and let's move into a really great element of this movie.
Yeah.
And in fact, my whole article is about this part of the movie.
Okay.
And we're talking about everything from cinematography to set design to all the artistry behind the physical making of this movie. And we usually start off with like a favorite shot or something like that, but let's start off a little generally. In terms of like the look of, I guess, Texas, quote unquote, in the 1870s, the way they portray it in this film, did you buy it?
Yeah. Yeah, I bought it all the way. And the only thing I didn't buy, and I already touched on this, was the level of topographic relief.
Okay.
Because I just envisioned Texas being quite flat.
Okay.
And there were some pretty, not substantial mountains, but I would call them, like
So
foothills.
So for people who aren't familiar with the term you just used, the two terms you just used, topographic relief, we're talking about the elevation, right?
Elevation change. Elevation change. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's quite a bit of undulating landscape in this.
Yeah.
And like I said, I don't know Texas, but I can't think of any mountain ranges in Texas by name.
I can't either.
And I wouldn't consider anything in this movie mountain ranges, but certainly hills, lots of, foothills and stuff like that.
Right.
And then the pinyon trees, that was kind of like a dead giveaway too. That's high desert country, like pinyon juniper. Texas is a low desert, isn't it?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing.
But either way, it was gorgeous.
Let me ask you though, did they get their cardinal directions right?
So they were traveling. So
They were heading east, right?
I think they were heading southeast.
Southeast. All right.
And I gotta admit, I was quite a bit enthralled, and I wasn't paying attention to where the sun was. So
Oh my God. So they knocked you out of your cardinal direction mode, and you were invested in the story?
yeah, man, I was totally into it, and I wasn't paying attention to where the sun was in the sky relative to where they were going. So, yeah, but I do think they were traveling southeast.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I definitely got the sense that they were traveling east at least. Awesome. Let me ask you about, so the look of the towns. Like I said, I've seen a lot of Westerns. Some are better than others, but the way Western towns are portrayed in the genre, they all kind of have a similar vibe going on. And this film is very much in line with that. But at the same time, I felt like often you feel like even though you get two different towns in a film, it's like they're the same place with different signage.
Yeah.
And you never get that sense in this film. It always feels like, at least for me anyway, that the towns that they go through are unique in their own right. And I think that's true from the first one that we get introduced to in the beginning to especially Dallas, because Dallas is like bustling. It looks like it's really well developed during this time. And
yeah, I was going to say for the time period, right?
Yeah.
Like, because when they come into the valley where Dallas is, it is starting to sprawl, but it still looks like, a little...
Still looks like a Western town.
Western town,
Yeah.
but it's still like, you can tell that it's bigger.
But compared to like the town in the beginning, it seems like it's almost like a temporary camp in the mud. It's
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought it was really impressive with the set design, and I'm curious to know how much of it was physically built. It looks like maybe a good chunk of at least the exteriors were built up. I don't know, but were you pretty happy with the quality of the look of some of those towns?
Yeah, I bought it all the way. So I got a question for you, since you're more of like a film
Sure.
guy than me. When they roll into Dallas and you can see the town, that's probably all CG, right? Like that valley where the town is in the bottom and kind of starting to
Are you talking about like the
expand.
aerial?
Like they come up and over a little saddle, and then they start to descend into Dallas. and you could see the town down in the valley. That's got to be
I think that's CG,
right?
yeah.
Okay, but it looked really good.
Yeah, the CG, I think, for what it is in this film, I think it worked really well. I was more so impressed with like what looked like the practical sets when they're walking through the town.
Yeah. Yeah, when they're walking through, I love the tone and like the filth of the little shitty town.
Yeah.
With the little mini dictator.
Yeah.
Mr. Farley. I loved how dark it was in there. And I love how like everybody was like had this kind of like outlaw vibe.
Yeah.
And then Hanks gives kind of like a quasi-socialist rant and gets them all riled up. I thought that was great.
Started a little revolution on his way out.
Right. And I really liked all the costume stuff. Like I didn't see anything that looked out of period. Yeah.
I liked some of the costume design that Johanna had. Mm-hmm. I liked her Kiowa gear getup, her cultural wear. I thought that was awesome. And then when they try to strap a dress on her, I love just how her look in that clothing. She just doesn't look comfortable. And that goes back to her acting chops. She does a really good job, like physically and with the lines.
Yeah.
I will say one thing that stuck out to me immediately in terms of the visual look of this movie is your introduction to Captain Kidd when he gives his first like news reading, and immediately after when he's in his room after that. I loved how it's so dimly lit.
Yeah, like all the lanterns.
Yes, like I loved, because at first I was like, my TV must not be picking this up right because it's so dim. But then when you look at the frame, no, it's not that at all. It's almost like they're using just the lights of the lanterns.
That's what I was gonna say.
To light the scene.
Almost like they don't have, backlighting and
right,
and all the the bells and whistles that we normally see.
Yeah.
It's like almost like, and it almost had like a fuzzy look.
Yeah, so I was going to get to that second. There was like this haze, right? You noticed that too?
Yeah.
And that could be dust. That could be like the steam or the condensation of being in a cramped space. I loved that look. It gave it this really like authentic quality. And that really stuck out to me. Just those little bits of detail, I think, add to the authenticity of the time period. And I'm no like architectural historian or anything like that, but at least on screen it comes across as authentic.
Yeah, and so I watched this on my laptop in pitch black, with like my face right up on it and headphones on. And it was certainly purposeful, right? Like the fuzz and the dim lighting and all that. It wasn't, a crappy internet connection or anything on my end. It was like totally just felt like you said, really, really authentic.
Yeah. So I mentioned that in the article, and it stood out to me immediately. I was like, wow, I really like the look of this film. And you don't get that a lot in some of the Westerns that we get. Everything from the detail in, I don't know if you picked up on this, but the detail of the windows, like you can tell an old window because it's not completely clear. It has some of that, what is that even called? When the glass is like, it's not uniform, so you get kind of that wavy, blurry thing going on with the window panes.
I don't know, man.
But yeah, that's even just a little detail like that. It's really cool to see.
Manganese? No, that's not manganese.
Yeah, I don't know.
But they used to make glass differently.
Yeah.
It might be manganese. I don't know.
I don't know. But yeah, only me watching a film going, oh, look at the glass. It's cool. It looks old.
Everything looked like period, man. It looked so accurate.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, it looks like they did their homework for sure.
Like even down to like the leaf springs on the wagon and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That wagon looked rickety and legit.
Yeah. Yeah, it was so cool. Now I'll ask you, was there any particular shot or sequence that stood out to you that you enjoyed in the film?
I enjoyed the dust storm and the end of the dust storm a lot for some reason.
Okay.
It had this very like mystical vibe.
Yeah.
And I won't say anything about what happened in that scene, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
I really liked that, and I really liked a scene that was similar to that when she's on the bank of the river or the cliff of the river.
Right.
And that was another part where I was like, I don't know if they got rivers that rage like that in Texas.
I was kind of thinking that too.
With, that are like 50 feet incised into the landscape with sheer cliffs on both sides. Like, I love my geography. I feel like I would have heard something about this epic river that runs through like, I know the Rio Grande, but I've seen pictures of it. Don't look like that.
Yeah.
But that scene, right, when she's looking across the river and it's pouring rain, that's got to be all CG, right?
It seemed like it.
That whole thing was CG, but it had this very cool vibe that spoke to some of the themes that you were discussing earlier about both people are struggling and both people are like almost fighting to keep their way of life.
Yeah, well, here's the thing too. Like when I watched that sequence, there's almost something ghost-like.
Yeah,
about the Kiowa on the other side.
Yeah,
the way they're moving, where you only kind of see them in silhouette. They're like these figures with no faces that are just kind of floating by.
Yeah,
something really ghostly to that visual.
Ghostly is the perfect word because it's almost like a metaphor, right?
Yeah,
it's almost like a metaphor for the population levels that used to be there.
Right. Yeah. Now it was a really powerful image, and it's like a gut-wrenching moment too.
And then all those pinyon trees right there, man. I love my pinyon.
Yeah, for sure.
But what about you, man? Anything stand out to you?
For me, it was the whole sequence, the action sequence, I guess.
Okay.
In the hills.
The outcropping.
The outcropping of boulders.
Yeah.
The way that was executed and shot just kept you on the edge of your seat. And I loved how it was all silent. It was, you got just the sound of footsteps and falling rock and dust, and it was very just visceral and just really raw. And I love that about that piece. And then the way it ends, it was awesome. But I love that it wasn't just in there to entertain you. It develops Johanna's character, it develops Captain Kidd's character, and it keeps the story moving forward. And those are always like the best way to insert action, is when it serves the story and the character.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was like a nice bridge to keep you into the story and bring you into the second half of what's gonna. So I thought that was really well executed.
I don't want to segue there yet, but the sound element, in that scene in particular, I loved.
Yeah, it was so well done.
Like you mentioned, right? Like the footsteps and the dirt falling off the rocks and the coins. That's all I'll say. But
did you have any idea that that's what she was gonna do?
No,
me either.
And I was just like so stoked because I didn't even pick up that the little bucket that she picked up. That's what was in it.
Yeah, that's their little donation bucket, right?
Yeah, because I didn't catch that earlier in the movie. I guess I wasn't paying good enough attention.
Yeah, me either.
But to see her smarts, and it happens multiple times throughout the movie where her wits are basically save Captain Kidd.
Yeah, single-handedly.
And there's something I love about that kind of like native utilitarian mentality that she's got, right?
Yeah, so well executed. But yeah, I had no idea that's what that was. I was like, is she going to pay them in dimes to stop? And then it's something completely different, and it works perfectly. And if you've seen it, you know exactly what we're talking about. All right, well, let's keep moving, and let's get into the score of the film. Now, as always, I'm very interested to know what your take is on any particular score in a film. Did this one work for you at all?
It did. It really worked. It was very period, and it was very not overbearing.
Yeah.
There's so many scenes in this movie where they're traveling, right? Where it could have just been like this booming, overwhelming score, but they kept it at a level to where it was simply there to enhance. It wasn't there to take center stage, right?
Yeah.
And I totally thought it was perfect. And like I said, they respected, or like you said, they respected silence.
Yeah.
As well. Like there was times when there should be any score and there wasn't.
Right. And I think in the moments where there's no score in this film, it packs an emotional punch because all you're left with is the moment itself, and you're just there to sit in that moment. And I think that's when the absence of score is so effective. And the moments that they choose to be silent in this film, they work so well. But like you said, there are some sweeping shots and some really epic moments that have a score that's clearly audible, but it never feels like it's a cookie cutter Western type score.
Yeah.
Any classic Western that you can think of from the 50s and 60s, Magnificent Seven or anything like that. It's nothing grandiose like that, but it does feel period, and it fits this element of the West. So they do incorporate a little bit of that, but it never takes you out of the moment. And so, yeah, I think for me, the score was super effective. And just, I'm completely blown away by how well every element of the film weaves together. It all complements so well, from like the visuals, the acting, score, set design, themes in the story, and the different groups of people that are represented in the film. I think it all comes together so well, and looking at it in that way, to execute it at such a high level, it took massive skill to do. Your hat has to go off to the director, I think, in this film.
Oh, hell yeah. What? Greengrass, right?
Greengrass, yeah.
Love the name, buddy.
And he co-wrote the screenplay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just did an outstanding job.
It would have been really easy to fuck this up.
Absolutely.
Don't you think? Like, really easy to, like, dip too deep into the cliche bucket, or overdo the score, or just go straight cheese with the ending without any of the kind of misdirection.
Yeah.
Or go too deep into the messaging. Like, it's all just right in line with where it should be. Because the messaging is never beat over your head or even verbally expressed. It's all subtle.
Yeah.
And it's all for you to pick up.
Right.
But one thing I want to say, the sound effects, right? We were talking score, but the sound effects,
Okay.
I thought were awesome.
Okay.
Particularly the gunshots and the ricochets, right?
Oh,
it's so easy
okay,
to
yeah.
just put bangs in
Yeah.
when guns are firing, but to pay attention to the detail and put the ricochets in.
Yeah.
Because have you ever heard gun ricochets before?
I have not.
Or like bullets zoom by and stuff?
Nope.
They really paid attention to it.
Okay.
I was a little side note story. I was on a job once where we were working on a Memorial Day weekend out in the middle of fucking nowhere, and some good old boys came out to where we were working nearby to have themselves a Memorial Day shoot off, right, and shoot a bunch of shit. And we were working above them, and they were shooting at the backstop of some railroads, or like the banks of this railroad, and we were above the railroad on a landform, and they had no idea we were there, but they were shooting at this landform, and all of their bullets were ricocheting and going over our heads. And it was really scary, but like hearing a bullet whistling by, you never forget that. And they paid attention to that kind of shit in this movie.
Oh, wow.
And at the times when they used echo to highlight the vastness of the landscape they were in, like I'm thinking about the gunshot where it's Mercy gunshot that Captain Kidd has to do at some point. I won't give anything away. Mm-hmm. But you know what I'm talking about? And did you notice how that gunshot echoed into the into the next scene?
Yeah.
And kind of like echoed and echoed and echoed even into the next day where the scene takes place. I absolutely loved that.
Oh, yeah.
And then the coins, right? Even the sound of the coins hitting the bucket.
Yeah.
When he's doing his news stuff.
Yep.
I just thought it all just hit so well.
So well done. Well, I think we've kind of gushed a bit.
A little gushy on this episode, which is a nice
It
pick
is,
me up from
absolutely.
last week, which was a total letdown.
I'm completely okay with gushing on this movie.
It deserves it. It's got, 87 and 89 on the old tomato meter.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's gush
For
worthy.
sure. Well, let's get into the love-hates. I think we gave enough spoilers as to our love-hates, but let's start with you, man.
I loved basically everything about the movie, but what I loved the most, and this kind of speaks to me specifically and some opinions that I hold, but the messaging about not better, different.
Yeah.
When it comes to the contrast between quote-unquote civilized life and the closer to the earth native life. One's not better than the other. They're just different.
Yeah.
And I loved that message, and I loved that they did it in such a subtle and impactful way via Tom Hanks's character.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see the light bulb going off in his head throughout the movie about that exact thing. And I brought this up before, I think when we did Waiting for the Barbarians, right? I brought this exact same thing up, and I've always held these opinions that the way that history is taught tends to reinforce this false narrative of civilized and barbarian, or whatever word you want to use. And I just love that.
Yeah, well said.
What I hated about the movie is absolutely nothing. But what I do hate is that these same themes that are presented in this movie are still driving the schism in the country that me and you are both citizens of to this day. 150 years later, there's still a bunch of people that think it's their right to be hateful and bigoted.
Yeah.
And that's shitty.
Yeah.
But this movie highlights how shitty it is in a good way.
Well, and the other thing I think that this movie, it gives you a sense of hope because it does give you a few instances where people can change. And I forget the character's name already, but
John Callie, bro.
There you go. Like the moment where he undergoes this conversion after hearing a simple news story that Captain Kidd reads in this town. It changes kind of his outlook on things. And that's always possible with anyone you come in contact with. So it's not all just kind of this down and out message of like times are still shitty, which they are, but there's always the chance for change and like conversion in people. And I thought that the film gives you a nice mixture of the reality of the situation, but also how things can change for the better in some circumstances. So it's just a great overall message, I think.
Yeah, John Callie's out there supporting Bernie Sanders now. Just off of one little riling speech from Captain Kidd.
Oh, gosh. 1/10 of 1%.
What? What about you, man? What's your love-hates?
So I think it's no question. I love all kinds of things about this film, but just to pick out a real easy one, I love the design of this whole film. I love the look. I love the craftsmanship, from costumes to set design to the landscape and shooting locations. It just all feels really authentic. But I think what is even more impressive is it's not just all that. It's also a story with extreme substance and relevance. And it all kind of meshes well together. And it's not just a story that was written up because we're going through a particular moment in this country's history at the time. It's relevant to the story they're telling for that period. And I think it just kind of happens to mesh well with things that are going on today. And anytime that you can do that, it's really powerful, because people aren't just going to roll their eyes and be like, oh gosh, they're going to try and stuff this down our throats, like try to get us to look at ourselves in the mirror. It does that, but it does so in a way that's relevant to the particular time and place of the story. And so when you do that, I think it's going to stick and land with a bunch of people. And based off of the Rotten Tomatoes stuff, it seems like it's already doing that. So I love that about the film. And like you, there's nothing I hate about this movie. I really enjoyed it, and I was kind of blown away like you were. I saw that the Rotten Tomatoes score was pretty high, but I wasn't sure if I was going to buy it. But it just really, really won me over. I love everything about this movie.
So do you look at the Rotten Tomato score before you watch a movie?
Sometimes. And the only reason why I did at this film is because I think this was one of those films I had bookmarked because I was really interested.
Well, we've been putting it off for a few weeks anyway.
And I'll watch anything Tom Hanks is in. Like you said, he's not in a bunch of stuff, and when he's in something, it's kind of newsworthy. So it was definitely on my radar. Yeah. But even more so, I guess that's why it blew me away, because I wasn't expecting it to land so well. I thought maybe it might have been overhyped, but it wasn't at all. So let's slap a score on this thing. What are you going to give it?
Oh, it's a 5. I don't even need to I don't even need to justify any of it. It's a 5 all the way. Every category, it knocks out of the park. 5 bong loads, man.
All right. It's no secret I'm going to give this one a 5. It's
Yeah, you can't not give it a 5, I don't think.
It's just for everything we discussed on the hour or so that we spent time talking about it. It's for all those reasons. It's just go out and see this film. Rent it. I'm really bummed that I wasn't able to buy it. But it was $20 well spent.
I'm going to buy it whenever it comes available.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. I definitely did not feel disappointed dropping money on this rental. It was well worth the investment, I think. It's more so than a film. It's like an experience. You get drawn into the world. And I love films that do that. And I'm pissed that we didn't get to see this on a big screen.
Yeah. I want to call out a critic on the old Tomato page.
Uh-oh.
Peter Bradshaw writes for The Guardian.
Peter Bradshaw.
And you can fuck off, Peter. That's all.
The top 1/10 of 1%.
You're obviously shitting on this movie simply to be a contrarian. So fuck off, Peter.
Well, yeah, we got to end there. I mean,
No, we're not going to end there. I got a question.
Yeah, what's up?
For you, a somewhat of a film buff and historian, where does this rank on the Hanks resume?
Oh.
I figured that would be a tough one.
Yeah, this is a tough one, man. And this is something I'd have to take time to do, but
You'd have to get the old Excel sheet out and start
for sure
listing everything.
Yeah, I mean, what was it? A few months ago, we did Greyhound. He was amazing in that film too.
That was good.
Yeah, that was last summer.
Yeah, I was out in
Crazy.
Arizona on that one.
Crazy. Yeah. So he just, like you said, he picks these bangers. He knows exactly what's good for him. And this one is no exception. I mean, I would definitely throw it up there among some of his best films, for sure.
I'm running through my head, and it's like, fuck, there's so many.
Yeah.
There's so many awesome Tom Hanks movies.
Yeah, there are. Like Saving Private Ryan, Greyhound, Captain Phillips, Castaway.
Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
Forrest Gump.
Oh, yeah, Forrest Gump.
Dude, like...
No idea. Splash.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. Splash is a good movie.
You gotta respect the 80s shit, man.
Oh, yeah. The comedic Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Big.
that's a perfect example of these comedic actors busting out their chops in the dramatic roles.
That's so funny. He was a stand-up, right? Back in the day?
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Right?
Anyway,
Yeah.
all right. I just wanted to throw that question at you.
Yeah, I would definitely say this is up there amongst some of his best work, though. I really liked him in this role. A+. Well, that's our first fiver for 2021?
I gave Promising Young Woman a 5.
Is that our
So this is
first
my second.
consensus?
Yeah, it's our first consensus 5 of the year.
Okay, cool. Nice. Well, I'm glad it was this one because I really enjoyed it.
I did too.
Yeah.
It's totally worth the money, people.
Yeah, so go see it. It's obviously we're going to recommend it. And I think, what was this movie rated?
I don't know.
Yeah, I never.
I feel
Dude,
like
this
it
movie's
may have been
PG-13.
Oh, it's PG-13?
PG-13.
Because
This is
there's
one
some
of the-
pretty colorful language in the background.
Yeah.
It's never the leads who are saying all the horrible shit, but there is
Yeah.
colorful language.
I'd have to say this is probably one of the best PG-13 films I've seen in a while.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that kind of blows my mind. Awesome. Well, I would
If I had to
recommend
guess,
this.
I would have thought it was like right on the cusp.
Yeah, me too. But I would definitely recommend this film to adults, to younger people. I think anyone of any age could get something out of this story. It's definitely worth a watch.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Well, that's all I got in my bag of tricks.
It was a good one.
Yeah, definitely good. But yeah, people, that was episode 59 of The Buff and the Blazer, talking a little bit about news of the world. We both highly recommend it. So if you get a chance, if you have the time, the money, give it a shot, rent it on whatever digital platform you watch on, and I think you're going to have a pretty good experience with it. So catch news of the world, and until then, have a good week, everybody, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Peace.